Welcome back to today's launch of Leading from the Back. I am so excited to be here with the wonderful Rachel Maunder. The topic for this session is all about how to tell your story to grow your tribe. And what we're really interested in is not necessarily the big stories. Now, would love to know actually in the comments, let's make this a little bit more engaging. Do you have a big story? Do you tell stories in your business? Would you like to know how to tell stories better in order to find new clients? Now, before I come to Rachel, I want to read a tiny section from my book, my new book. So I'm going to read a little poem, which the book starts off with, because actually I wanted this book to be full of stories, because I think stories really help us to understand where we've come from and where we're going. It helps people to connect to the human part of us. And I remembered this story from childhood that really made me laugh. So I included it at the start of the book, and I wrote this little poem. And the poem, you've got to imagine me, Julie, aged 8.5, right? So that'll give you the context. But I'll show you. Just you wait and see. One of these days, I'll be allowed to shine and the world will see me. And the story that I tell, I won't read it word for word, but the story that I tell is a really clear memory that I have of being like 8 or 9, sitting on the stairs at home, twiddling the banister, being a right little cow because I've been told off for something from my mum, and I've been fighting with my brother, and I just felt like I wasn't being heard. You know, I was always in trouble, and I thought, right, what can I do to get noticed? So I thought, I know, I'll stop speaking. I'll stop speaking and I'll see how long I could be quiet for before they notice. And I spent all day not talking and nobody even noticed. And so in the book I talk about, and I talk in a lot more kind of descriptive terms about, my night dress that I was wearing and how I was kind of bickering with my siblings. And I also finish off with saying maybe if I'd gone on hunger strike, maybe then they would have, noticed. So anyway, with that being said, Rachel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. It's great to be here. I'm Rachel Maunder, and I work mostly with emerging speakers, is the phrase I use, to help them find and craft their stories into speaking. Because I think it's that group of people who perhaps need extra support in understanding exactly what you've been talking about, Julie, that it doesn't matter if you haven't got a big story. You sit on a mountain of thousands of everyday stories, just like the one that you've told, and they bring your speaking to life. They really do.
Absolutely. Now, I know when you joined Tribe Builder, this was not what you was doing. So talk a little bit about how you've changed your niche a little bit, and what that process felt like, because we have definitely nailed your niche over the last year.
Definitely we have. Yeah, absolutely. It's been a long process, Julie. So I have changed my niche. Let's say I started off as a business coach back in probably about 2011, 2012. Then I started adding a bit of speaker coaching alongside of that and really enjoyed that. I was off running workshops. I was doing some one-to-one coaching. So then I did some work back in 2015 with a different business coach, and she tried to get me to narrow my niche. She said there's millions of business coaches and thousands of speaker coaches, and she was right, of course. So during the time of that, I was the workshop mentor, and then I switched and realized actually it was the mindset piece that I liked. So I became the mindset mentor. And then I looked at all the different things I offered, because I am a sort of, I'm very all bit of this, bit of that, like to do something different kind of person. And I found what I thought was a wonderful big umbrella to encompass everything that I did so that I could keep doing it all. I didn't have to narrow my niche. So when I came into Tribe Builder, my niche was in the target market rather than in the offering, because I was working alongside women in the professions where they were underrepresented at leadership. So, and where I seemed to be finding my clients was in the world of women in law, and also I'm still doing actually a project with the Royal Navy Women's Network, so all about helping them find the confidence to take the next step up.
Mm.
So of course then lockdown hit and I had to kind of take a step back. So I thought, hello, probably nobody's thinking about promotion. But it was actually a comment from you sometime in July that came home to me, was that you've known me for years. You've been working with me for over 6 months at that point, and that you still didn't fully understand what it was that I did. Not well enough to be able to say, oh, you need to go and see Rachel. So that actually went very deep with me, because I thought, wow, you still don't know, and I've been doing all this stuff with you. So I thought, well, okay, if I had to choose just one thing of all the things I offered, because there was about 8 or 9 different things that I was offering under this lovely big umbrella, what would it be? And I thought, well, what is the thing I like the most? And that's the speaker coaching on the broader front. But in particular, what was beginning to happen was that more and more people were wanting help with their story. And I loved that. Yeah. And that I recognize that's when I'm in my flow. What I mean by that is I think, they're paying me for this. Because basically what I do is listen to somebody's story and tell them how I think they could craft it into a talk. And that's, to me, I just love that. I just love to do it. But behind all of that is that whole thing of someone somewhere needs to hear your story, however small it is. And I was watching your interview with Heather and that whole thing about when you've got an everyday story that you're sharing, it's only a small step up from where your audience is to where you are. And they can take that thing of thinking, well, if she can do it, I can definitely do it.
Yeah.
And they just hear your story and they think, okay, actually, I can do something different. They may not do the same thing as you, but you just inspire them to make a change. And goodness knows where that can lead. It's that whole ripple effect, isn't it?
Yeah. And I love, like, we grappled with your niche for a long, long time. And I can remember that moment in July where I had to give you the truth bomb. I had to give you the truth bomb. It was done with love, though. It was done with love. Because I know how awesome you are at the work that you do. And this is a problem I see with a lot of people that wear multiple hats. And there was a time in the 90s where that was fashionable. Oh, I wear multiple hats. And actually in the book, I do say a swear word and I say, no one gives a shit. I might actually use the F word. No one gives a fuck about your hats. What we care about is whether you can help me with the problem I have right now. And we know that when you are in a network and you are in multiple networks, it's really hard for people to refer you if they're not completely clear on what you're doing at the moment. And when you chop and change, and I've done this in the past as well, you know, chop and change different things, people just are like, oh, they lose trust that you're currently doing the thing that they're trying to find somebody to hook up with, you know. And I love that now you are like, I'm all about stories. And I know that there was a mindset piece, wasn't there, about who am I to do this?
Yes,
particularly around this idea of I don't have a big enough story. So speak to that, because you stepped up like a queen, I must say.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, my sort of keynote, if you like, is based on my story of sitting. When I first was doing a lot more speaking than I had been previously, I joined Toastmasters, which is a great organisation for learning and honing the skill of speaking. And I'd only been a member for a couple of months, and I went along to the sort of local final, if you like, of their annual speech contest. And it was that thing of, I sat in the audience and listened to these people and I thought, I am going to be on that stage next year. I can do this. And just that was so inspiring for me. And it really lit me up. And then I started to think about, I was trying to be too strategic about it and think, okay, now the people that came first, second and third, what did they have in common? Because all their talks were completely different. And that was like that, oh, they all had a story. They all had a big story. So that's me, then, because I haven't got one.
Yeah.
And then I would try and sort of find things in my background that I could speak about, because there are people out there and their main thing that they're speaking about is something that has happened to me as well, but it just didn't sit right, because that wasn't what I was called to speak about. I didn't want to speak about those things. So yeah, and I don't quite know what happened. It was probably towards the end of next year that suddenly I thought, actually, I'm always telling stories. I'm in my little weekly tip that I send out on a Monday morning. There's always something that's happened to me during the week that's made me think differently about something. And
Yeah.
the purpose of the story is to get people thinking a bit differently.
Yeah. And we know, like on social media, in terms of getting traction, we know we can put the best business posts out there, but the minute we put a post out there about what we had for lunch or what we did over the weekend, those are the ones that get the traction, right? And so it's finding that balance between the big narrative, right? And some of us do have this big, like, you know, the hero's journey, right? And, you know, in terms of my brand, I absolutely use that to my advantage. You know, I use the fact that 6 years ago, I had been made, you know, unemployed. I had a new baby. My relationship had broken down. You know, I had reached rock bottom. And over the last 5 or 6 years, I have crawled my way out. And I do use that story because I think it's relevant, because I think we all can, in whichever way, recognize that moment where we feel like, oh my God, things are really tough, right? And that inspiration is what people, what attracts people to me. But I also know that those big stories, people can start rolling their eyes at, like, all right, we know you're unemployed and now you're not, like, you know. So it's about getting a mixture, so like you have the big narrative where people follow your story over a period of time, but also you can tell the micro stories that are in the moment, that are about the shifts, you know, the small things, sometimes they seem like they're mundane, but people go, me too, like that's how I feel, you know. And that is where the human connection happens, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's all about engaging with your audience. And so, yes, tell your story, but always bring it. And what about you? You know, how do you relate to that? Do you have a story like that? What could you do to move on from it? It's kind of easier to do from within the small stories, because if you haven't been, you know, using your stories, if you haven't been unemployed and pregnant with your first child and no partner around, then you can't relate to that.
Exactly. For sure.
But, you know, like your little story about, you know, the child trying to make an impression by not speaking, we can all find something similar, probably.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's about having a range of stories, isn't it? So that people don't just get bored of your signature one, so to speak. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on when we did the archetypes, because the archetypes, I think you did Tribe Builder before that model came about.
Yes,
and so I did some bonus workshops to introduce the new model to my kind of retainer clients. And what did you make of it when you saw that range of archetypes and you saw the storyteller in there?
Well, I thought that was really interesting, because it wasn't actually, although it was one of my 3, it wasn't my main one, I didn't think. My main one was the Queen. I can't remember what my 3rd one was, but it was great to have storyteller in there. But I almost, at that point, Julie, when it first came out, I was almost, you know, that thing of, well, I can't really own that space, because actually I don't tell stories yet. Because that was always the thing that people would say about my speaking. It's, oh yeah, you know, competent talk, good message, but we want to hear a story, we want to hear a bit about you. So it just felt a bit, who do I think I am to be suddenly saying I'm a storyteller, because actually I haven't been telling stories. So it happened very quickly, but
and that who do you think you are piece, we can all relate to that. Who am I to write a business book? I mean, it's one of the things that I talk about in the book, is having listened to Brené Brown. I remember the first time I listened to Brené Brown, and I had this sinking feeling in my stomach, like, shit, there is already somebody talking about the stuff that I talk about, and she's bloody brilliant, you know. And I had this moment of, I might as well give up. I might as well give up talking about vulnerability. I might as well give up talking about connection, because there's already somebody out there that's the queen of it, you know. And what was interesting was, about 6 months after that, I watched the Brené Brown Netflix documentary the night before I ran the London Marathon the last time. And on a whim, I tweeted her. And when I woke up the following morning, she tweeted me back, good luck. Couldn't believe it. I felt like my life was complete. Brené Brown had messaged me. But it is this thing of comparisonitis, isn't it? You know, and where do I sit in the pecking order? And am I worthy? I mean, that's the big piece, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are an increasing number of people out there in the storytelling field. Some of them are doing corporate storytelling, others like me are coaching speakers, but I will find, you know, the people that want to work with me will come and find me, and
Sure.
vice versa. I'm not right for everybody, as none of us are right for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's working really well for me. I've got
Yeah.
some clients and I'm really enjoying doing what I'm doing.
Brilliant. What would you say has been your biggest lesson this year?
Ooh, gosh. It's just I think it was the forced lesson of having to take that time back in sort of April, probably, to think, actually just sit and listen and follow your tuition.
Yeah.
And just because that's kind of what I was doing. That was my process for making my decision when you said to me that about, you know, I still don't understand what it is you do. It was like, you know, what is it that I enjoy the most and think that I'm the best at? And really just sort of taking that time to listen to my own intuition. What is the thing I enjoy the most? Because it still felt, you know, a lot of that, well, who do I think I am to be saying that's what I'm going to do? That was still there. It's not there now, and that's a relatively short time for it to have gone. So I think that's the thing. Just think, okay, I will find my people. I will find my people. There's enough out for all of us.
For sure, for sure. And so in terms of working with me, obviously I threw some truth bombs your way. I like to think that I'm quite balanced as a coach, that I'm equal part empath and, you know, I care deeply about my client's transformation and I can tread gently, but I am also no bullshit. Would that sum up the balance of me as a coach?
It would. I think, you know, one of the greatest things, I love the fact that you know bullshit. There's no point paying a coach that isn't going to be like that. But at the same time, I love the fact that you are kind, and that, you know, if somebody's come and had a crap week, then, you know, you're not going to get the bullshit button out. So yeah, there's all that. I like your humor and just your sort of needle ideas that you just come to you. So yeah.
And I love, so Rachel is a graduate of Tribe Builder, and she's now in my follow-up program called the Fellowship. And one of the things that I've loved about the Fellowship is that we have a common language because everybody's been through Tribe Builder. So it's a membership that you have to have done Tribe Builder. And on the weekly calls, we never know what's going to pop up, do we? We don't know whether it's going to be like tactical, whether people are going to need a hug. You know, we never know what the mix of, whether it will be everybody getting an equal spot or whether it'll be a case study on one person. And I love how vulnerable people allow themselves to be in that group. So in terms of that vulnerability piece, how has that felt for you in terms of being encouraged to show up when you don't have all the answers?
I think that's the key bit, isn't it? I mean, you know, I've kind of been part of other groups where you almost got to pretend that you are feeling okay. And yeah, I think it's the amazing thing about the Fellowship is that, of course, on Tribe Builder, we all started at day one and went through to the end together, getting to know each other as we went along. But of course, in the Fellowship, there's people from different cohorts. So actually, I still don't know all of them terribly well, but there's something about that space that I know, if I'm saying to you, I just need to be handled delicately today, Julie. I don't want that, you know, the push thing, which, you know, in fairness, I don't think I have very often had that, but I do know there was one week where I was feeling like that, and I've certainly witnessed it for other people, that everybody just comes and, you know, does a virtual hug kind of thing.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things that I realized when writing the book was that I had these 12 archetypes that I knew, I knew deeply what they were. And then I had this nagging sense that I needed to include a 13th one, which was the archetype of the hero. And, you know, people know the archetype of the hero and the idea of, you know, the hero's journey and all of that kind of stuff. But it was this reminder that we we sometimes put coaches up on pedestals. We put coaches and experts up on these things like they're gurus, like they have all the answers, like they're going to be the one that saves us. And I don't think that is the case. I think we save ourselves. We are our own hero. And I think the invitation is to think about being your own savior, being the person that asks for what they need, being the person that says, I don't need any coaching today. What I need is some reassurance, or, actually what I really need to do is know how to use this bit of tech, or whatever it is. And just having that sense of empowerment that I will ask the right questions. I will get the support that I need from my coach, rather than the energy being on that person that we put up there to save us, because we don't need saving. I think that's the point I'm trying to make. And so when you're working with clients, do you feel that dynamic, of them, the frustration that they feel?
Yeah, I think it's about trying to find where they are, and getting alongside them, rather, sometimes it's interesting actually, because I've just coming to the end of my online program, where of course that's slightly different in that I've taken them through a process. So therefore, in a sense, I have an agenda for the weekly call. But when I'm doing my individual coaching, I might have a sort of agenda in mind, but the client may have a different one, whether it's a stated or an unstated. So yeah, it's about going with what they bring, and of course something else will always come out of it, as it does on our calls. So I can remember a couple of times probably coming on the call saying, well, I don't need anything in particular today, just here to listen in and take part, and actually still going away with something of great value. And I hope that I'm doing that same thing in my coaching, because something will pop up in the course of an hour and a half that was not necessarily planned or intended on either side.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the reasons that I love group programs. I mean, I do some one-to-one, but I get energized by groups, because I know you are multiplying the learning. Not everyone has to have a case study or a spotlight on them, because often many of the problems that we're facing, our colleagues and our peers are facing them too. So sometimes hearing somebody else's problem get solved, you get the realizations yourself, don't you?
Yes,
so
exactly.
So for those people watching, what one piece of advice would you give in terms of them kind of leaning into their storyteller for 2021?
I would say, think about if you are somebody who is in that place that I was in for a long time, of thinking you don't have a story worth sharing. Just think back. A good starting point is that your key change points in your life, and they're actually different for everybody. It might have been change of house, change of school, leaving home for the first time, change of job. Just sort of think about those, create your timeline of different things that have happened to you. But it might also be around, we're in the Christmas season now. What were your stories about Christmas? Was there a present you hated, a present you loved? What are the traditions in your family, and how are you still keeping them on? Is there a story about something funny that happened? Because although you need to have the learning in order to pass on to your audience, it doesn't have to be a learning that was there at the time. It can just be a story. Just think of all those things, celebrations, what comes up when you get together with family and friends. Oh, do you remember that story when? Who else could benefit from that? So
I love that. I love that. And, I would say probably it depends on what day you get me, but I do know that I've built my business on stories. And so I love talking to you because it always stimulates stories. And what's just come up for me is a Christmas story. When I was about 8 or 9, my mum, God shows what age we were in, in the 80s, my mum and dad went out to the pub, leaving us all at home. This was on Christmas Eve, and me and my brother found the Christmas presents, and we carefully unpeeled them to find all of these boxes of Lego, and then we did them all back up and put them all back in the cupboard. And by the time my mum and dad got back from the pub, they clearly knew, but they didn't let on. And then we had to kind of fake the excitement in the morning. But it was, it was probably the worst Christmas ever because there was no surprise. We knew exactly what we were getting. And I'd forgotten that story. I'd
Yeah,
forgotten that
yeah,
story.
yeah.
But
I have
I
a
did. Go on.
I have a very, very similar story. It was we used to collect my presents from my gran probably a week or so before Christmas, because we didn't usually see them at Christmas. And mine was such a curious shape. I couldn't figure out what it was. And so I'd go, and I was probably same age as you were, 7, 8, something like that. And I'd poke and I'd whatever, because it didn't rattle, and it was sort of soft with a, and then there was a bit that was hard. And actually what it was, eventually I tore the paper, of course, and it was this lovely doll in, I mean, it sounds hideous now, but it was this very pretty doll in this foam rubber skirt, which is why it was sort of soft and hard. And because like once I knew what this most curious present was, I was really disappointed, not with the present, but that I knew what it was.
Yeah, and there are these little lessons,
Yeah,
aren't there? They're small and they're cute. I do tell the story of when I got a set of children's encyclopedia for Christmas, and my siblings thought that was the worst present ever, and I thought it was the best present ever. And I was absolutely in my element with those books. I mean, I could talk stories with you all day. I'm so glad you found your niche. I'm so glad that you've committed to it. I think you will do lots of other stuff underneath that umbrella. I don't think you'll lose sight of all of the other, you've got such a depth of experience and knowledge, but it just feels good to be able to refer you. I mean, that's the thing. It wasn't that I didn't understand what you did, but I just was never completely confident that that was the thing you were focusing on. And I think there was probably other people that felt a little bit similar, whereas now, all of your marketing is coherent and it's consistent. And I've seen, even in the last few months, just your confidence just kind of creeping up, over time. So it's just lovely to watch. So how can people find out more about your services and what you do?
The services are outlined on my website, which is just rachelmaunder.com. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook page which you can go and like, which is Rachel Maunder Story Coach. And just connect with me on any of those channels. It'd be great.
I love it. Thank you so much. And I will see you in the fellowship.
You will. Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Great fun today.